What we'll do is we'll get started. That's a couple of minutes past 12 now. So welcome. I hope you are all well today. Thank you for joining us. I think this is our fourth virtual event now. So it's really good to kind of virtually meet you all. My name is Abby. I will be the host of the event today. So I'll just kind of be keeping our speakers right and kind of putting your questions to them later on. We've also got Paul Hilton, who is our CEO at ESPC. He is joining us today. We also have Laura Walker, so she is a solicitor from one of our member firms, Deans. And we also have my colleague Will, who was just sneaking in a wee sip of his tea there. So he also works at ESPC, and he is there just in case kind of there is any internet issues for me, and he can jump in and help. So in terms of how things will work today, so we will start off with a kind of brief introduction from Paul of how the market has been performing. So he'll have a look at kind of, obviously things were relaxed with regards to restrictions kind of end of June. So we've now got a full month of data to kind of look at and review how the property market has been performing. So he'll be kind of going into a bit of that with you. We'll then move on to our Q&A section. So this will be the kind of pre-submitted questions that you guys sent in. And thank you for all of the ones that were sent in. It was really, really interesting to read all of them. What we have had to do is focus on the ones that were kind of around common themes. But I would highlight, if you do have any more niche questions, then please do get in touch. And we're more than happy to put you in touch either with Laura at Deans or one of our other property experts who can help you with those kind of more intricate questions. If we then have time at the end of the event, we will kind of do a on-the-spot Q&A. So there is a wee Q&A box at the bottom of Zoom. So throughout the session, please feel free just to chuck your questions in there. And then what we will do at the end is we will kind of do a quick fire round, and we'll put Laura and Paul on the spot and get them to answer your questions. Just to highlight, this is a webinar format, so you can see and hear us, but we cannot see or hear you. The best way for you to communicate with us during the event is through that Q&A box by popping your questions in there. At this point, if we were in the information center, I would probably do a quick fire drill, but obviously we're not in the information center, and hopefully my fire alarm's not going to go off. But what I will do is kind of let you know what will happen in case of any internet issues. So if my internet goes down, my colleague will step in and continue the event. If either of our speakers have issues with their internet, we will pause on that question, and then we will hopefully come back to it later. If for any reason there is a question that we're not able to answer because of internet issues, then please do get in touch with us, and Laura can either answer your question directly, or Paul or any of our other property experts can help you. But that is everything from me just now. I will pass you over to Paul, who'll give you a market update.
Thank you, Abby. I'm glad we're doing this today and not yesterday with the BT outage in Edinburgh, which certainly, I think it was 120,000 homes were affected, so we may have had a smaller attendance for the event yesterday. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll just walk you through really what we've seen in July, and then we'll talk a little bit about August, and then we'll dive right into the questions. So as Abby touched on there, we saw the easing of lockdown on the 29th of June. And what that meant was that the physical valuations and home reports could then be completed. So that was for all properties. Certainly prior to that, there was, if you could make a case, if it was reasonably necessary, you could organize a valuation or a home report, but certainly we saw the market open up from the 29th. And certainly it's safe to say we saw a real surge in buyer and seller activity from that date. In fact, in the run up to that, a lot of people were booking in valuations and viewings and all sorts of things. But what we should stress at this point is really it's about when we say things are relaxed, it wasn't a return to the old ways. It was really adjusting to the new normal. A virtual first approach is, we use that phrase a lot. And certainly we would encourage people when they're looking to view a property to make sure that they look at the 360 tour. And we seen an awful lot of people online looking at the virtual tours on our site before deciding if they want to go and view the property. I think as we moved through July, I think initially, as I say, there was a real bottleneck at the start of the month as the surveyors were trying to get out to do the home reports and the firms were getting out there to do valuations. But as that month went on, those things eased slightly. And we ended July with instructions up 42% on the same period the previous year. So a significant amount of properties came to the market in July. I think the other interesting change in July happened on the 15th of July when we saw the LBTT changes as well. So the threshold was lifted to £250,000 before you paid LBTT. And I think that really encouraged more properties to market and certainly more first-time buyers to really engage with the marketplace. Because I think we're seeing, a real sort of hot market at the moment. The confident firms, firms are very feeling that the market was really strong. So a good indicator of that is how firms market property. And what we saw in July is 94% of properties coming to market were coming on as offers over. So, firms very confident that they'd set a price and there would be bid up from there. And I'm sure later Laura will tell you a little bit about that, but it was some fierce competition for property. Asking prices as well. I think the asking price for Edinburgh 11 and 5 was 249,569 versus 224,716 last year. So again, another indicator that we're seeing increase in prices, we're seeing offers over, and we're seeing a generally strong market. If we're looking for any further evidence, I think valuation leads. So individuals requesting a valuation on their own property, leads were up 80%, 80 on the year before. So again, lots of people probably coming out of lockdown, evaluating, do they want to stay where they are? Do they want to move? Would they like a garden? Those sort of things. So again, big uptick there on valuations. And certainly then when we look at buyer activity, some astonishing numbers really. In July, viewing requests, so people requesting to go and view property, having looked at the virtual viewing, was up 248% on the previous period, corresponding period in the year before. And home report requests were up 73%, so huge increase. Our own website traffic on ESPC, absolutely delighted with these figures. We were up 72%. And a nice round figure to just add in there, we also saw 100,000 schedules downloaded in 1 month, which is a record for us. Last year it was 67,000 for the same month. So, all these indicators showing that the market was very strong. And it did, as the month went on, also translate into offers being accepted and agreed sales. Just to give you some indication of that, closing dates were up 76% in July, again versus July 2019. And properties going to under offer were up 40%. So, as the month went on, we saw more and more properties being agreed, sales being agreed. So in summary, I would say it was an extraordinary July, frantic. Delighted that Laura's managed to make the time to come to see us today, really, because I think it's really continued into August as well. Things are very busy out there. I think it's only appropriate to say that obviously there is a wider economic question and uncertainty about the wider economy. But at the moment, I think we're seeing, at the moment, a very strong property market. And certainly if we go back to sort of the last recession, I would say that Edinburgh's always had a typically resilient market anyway. So, as I say, whatever comes our way, I'm pretty confident that we will see, the market hold up well. But yeah, that was the month that was, Abby.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Paul. So what we'll do is we will fire on into our pre-submitted questions. So if Laura and Paul both want to unmute, that would be perfect. Mm-hmm. Our first question is for Paul, and we had a lot of people asking this question. So I think this is probably going to be one of the most important ones. Mm-hmm. So Paul, what is the likely impact on house prices, and will this be long term?
Mm-hmm. Okay. If I had £1 for every time we're asked this question, I could maybe afford a flat in Stockbridge. I think it's fair to say that, I think as I just touched on there, I think Edinburgh has a typically resilient market. We've seen that historically through thick and thin, the last recession being a good example. And I think if we go back to the period sort of pre-COVID, the fundamentals remain. I think there's a lack of supply within the marketplace. I think we saw that with, if we go back, say, a year ago, we were seeing rising prices and rising rental prices, which normally you see one or the other, but we were seeing both. And that is just an indication that there is a shortage of supply out there and people want to live in and around Edinburgh. I think short term, clearly if lenders restrict lending, that might have an impact. But generally that tends to come back, it doesn't last forever. And as I say, I think probably what we might see, and again, I'd be interested to get Laura's view here, but what we might see in the short term is maybe a cooling of the premium people pay for a property over the home report. So, it's about supply and demand and getting that balance right. And at the moment we have, we've probably gone from it being where there was certainly for a while, there was a huge undersupply and a rather higher demand for property. We're probably coming towards that equilibrium, but that doesn't last very long, normally a few days, and then it goes the other way, and you ultimately have too many properties and not enough buyers. But, I think it will be interesting to see how we stay in kilter with that. But probably what you'll see, as I say, is you might see that the premium that you have to pay to secure a property might cool slightly. I don't know what you think, Laura, but that would probably be the first thing you'd see.
I think I would definitely agree with that. We're getting to the stage where we probably are starting to see a bit of a balance in the market. Obviously, there was a rush of properties coming on, but now it does seem like we're getting a bit of a balance. And I think you're right in the fact that some prices might start to calm down a little bit. I think that's probably fair to say. But we know the market is very positive, and there's lots of different dynamics that need to be taken into consideration as well. So yeah. And
it's markets within markets, isn't it? I think it's very hard to say the market's going to do this because the Edinburgh is a mosaic of very different markets. It's hard to talk generally, really. You have to probably talk specifically.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. So we will move on to our next question. So this question is for Laura. And the question is it common when putting in offers on property to make them subject to sale of your own property?
Okay, so well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the SPC for asking me to take part in the event. Yes, the answer to that question is yes, it is very common practice to offer subject to sale, but there's no written rule to that. Obviously, every client has a different set of circumstances. Sellers will have different priorities as well. And that's why I think it's important that you get advice at the outset of your property search. Is that the right thing for you to do? If you are successful when submitting an offer subject to sale, it is likely that the selling solicitor will give you a period of maybe 3 or 4 weeks in which to obtain a successful offer for the property. I would also recommend that you would instruct a solicitor who can not only offer for you but also act in the sale, and therefore they should be able to coordinate both the sale and purchase at the same time, which is reassuring to the person that you're making the offer to, because obviously there should be a smoother process there, and it should hopefully remove some of the stress from you if the solicitor's there ready to look after both aspects for you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Laura. So just before we move on to the next question, it's just to remind you, just for anyone who has recently joined, if you do have any questions, we will try our best to get to them at the end. So if you just pop them into the Q&A box, and then if we have some spare minutes at the end, we will put Paul and Laura on the spot. But back to our kind of pre-submitted questions. So this one is for Laura. And Laura, is there any up-and-coming areas in Edinburgh at the moment?
Okay, so I've spent a long time thinking about that, I think, and I'm not sure there's 1 or 2 particular areas that really do stand out. I think Paul's touched on the fact that Edinburgh as a whole and the Lothians are performing very well at the moment, which is really, really encouraging. What I have noticed, and has been really interesting over the past month, is that buyer priorities have shifted, and attitudes to properties that they thought they may be interested in. Obviously, we know that there's now a premium for properties with maybe outdoor space, home offices potential to extend. Certain people are no longer having to attend an office, so there's no real need to be as close to a workplace as there maybe once was. And this has had definitely positive impacts on certain types of properties. It's maybe not an area, but it's a type of property that has seen a sort of an uplift over the last few months, which has been interesting. Paul, do you think that's maybe a fair assumption?
I think it's very fair. Yeah, as I say, I think a number of people at the valuations that we had, I think it's people have taken stock of where they are and probably have asked themselves those questions about where they'd like to be in the future, and that's probably has encouraged. We are seeing increased number of page views on the site for out of town properties, but again, I think it's important we that probably we can't say is a definite trend. We are only sort of 6 weeks into this, I think, before we can really make that decision. But yeah, so normally at this point we give our own localities a plug, I think, Laura. Do you want it's the hotspot?
Oh, definitely, yes. Outside Edinburgh's where it's at, of course.
Only kidding. We should never ramp the market. And in all seriousness, I think what I think is important is no one I think at ESBC or any of the firms would really want to see a, you know, real huge rise in prices, because we know that it ultimately ends in a bust. So, you know, we like a nice stable market, and ultimately the market only functions if first-time buyers can get on the ladder.
Well, Paul, you have kind of moved into your next
Brilliant
question
segue.
perfectly. Well done for that. So our next question, and there was a couple of people who asked kind of similar questions around this. So Paul, what is your advice for first-time buyers struggling to get onto the property ladder?
It's a good question, and you know, I think it's first thing I'd say is probably historically it's a really good time to try and buy a property. You know, there's lots of things at the moment, historically low level of interest rates. I think the government scheme, so the First Home Fund is a great scheme, and I think I would encourage all first-time buyers to really investigate that, because I think it's a great way of having to not find a huge deposit. You still need to find some deposit, but that can really help. And obviously we also have the ISA, Help to Buy ISA as well. So there's lots of things which I think the government's done, which I think is helping, and I would really recommend first-time buyers they seek advice on that if they haven't done already. And I think apart from that, I mean, again, this is going to be sounding awful glib, and it really isn't meant to. It's probably about just keeping the faith and persisting. I mean, Laura, you'll know better than me that you must have lots of stories of first-time buyers that lose out and get pipped and think, are we ever going to get on the market? And
Plenty.
And in the end, they do, don't they, Laura? I mean, it does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you do not want to get disheartened. It will happen for you. It's very rare that a first-time buyer will secure their first property that they offer for, particularly when the market is as busy as it is just now. And lots of the properties that they will be offering for, they will be competitive. It will be closing dates that they're going after properties. So yeah, do not get disheartened. What is important is you speak to the solicitor that you're dealing with, and make sure that you know that you're not going to be charged for placing a note of interest or for unsuccessful offers. And that way, you know, you can look at many properties at the same time, and try and, you know, submit offers for them to secure the one that's best for you.
I think you're right, and certainly at the moment, as we've said, we're seeing more and more properties come into market. So the supply tap is really being turned on, and I think that will mean that there will be more choice, and you know, if things cool a little, that gives first-time buyers more of a chance out there. I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think it is about looking on ESBC and signing up for my ESBC, because it's something like 90% now of all properties being listed are exclusive on ESBC. So they're on our site first before they're anywhere else. So, you know, you have a window of opportunity there, I think. And I think if you see something, it's about trying to engage with the firm as quick as you can to try and get to view that property, and probably putting yourself in the best position possible by having agreements in principle in place, so that, you know, you can offer with confidence, knowing that you can proceed and you can get a mortgage. Those things, I think, in the final analysis, when the selling solicitor is talking to the clients, help. I think would you say that, Laura, that, you know, if you get an offer, you're almost looking, if you're acting for the seller, you want to have their offer scrutinized a little to make sure the buyer can proceed?
Yeah. Absolutely. As a purchaser, you want to make sure your offer is framed and you're putting forward your best position. And it is really important, obviously, you've got your funding in place, and that your solicitor is going to convey that to the other side, so they're not left wondering what your situation is. Also being able, if you're a first-time buyer, to be flexible in relation to a date of entry can be really important as well, because the seller may have an onward purchase that they're trying to coordinate, and that might put you in a better position than perhaps another party if you can work in with their timescales as well.
I think so. I mean, it is a good point, isn't it? So you mentioned earlier, Abby, about people making an offer subject to sale. So if you have two offers in front of a client, and one is a first-time buyer can proceed immediately and fit in with a timescale that works for the seller, and one where they've got a property to sell, depends on the seller's situation, but you may well be recommending the first-time buyer, even if it's slightly less money.
Absolutely. And I mean, what's important is a lot of sellers, when they have closing dates and they have offers to consider, they will weigh up a lot of different options. And it might not be the top offer in figures that will achieve the property. It comes down to what position is maybe the best for the seller to accept, and what's the safest offer. And the safest offer will be that person that's taken the steps to make sure they have their funding in place, and that they're ready to move, and can coordinate, obviously, with your time sales as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's three drivers for any seller that ultimately make that decision. It's either it's peace of mind, it's time, and it's money. Yeah. And it can vary. You know, the emphasis on one of those three things will change from seller to seller. So, you know, long answer to a very short question, but, you know, it is about keeping the faith. And as I say, it will happen. And as I say, at the moment, with the schemes that are out there, it's a very good time.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So our next question is for Laura. And the question is, Laura, what are the typical fees to buy a property under £200,000?
Okay, so good question. As you can imagine, fees will vary from firm to firm. I would suggest that most firms probably will work on a fixed fee basis, and that's something that you should always check at the outset. Firms, when you talk to them, they should be completely transparent with what their fee structure will be. A lot will work on a sliding scale depending on the purchase price. Around about 200,000, you're perhaps looking at maybe a range between 600 and maybe £1,000, depending on what's involved. And obviously you'll have VAT on top of that, and also the outlays for registration fees and any other costs that we do. I think what's really important is that the relationship that you'll have with your solicitor is a really, really important one. You will talk to them a lot more than you possibly think. I certainly talk to a lot of my clients more than I've perhaps talked to a husband. So it can be quite an intense relationship for a short period of time. So it's really important that you instruct someone that you can see yourself working with going forward. You know, it's not purely based on fees. Your decision should not be that. It's a huge decision buying a property, and you should make sure you're instructing someone that you can see yourself working with going forward.
I think that's so important, isn't it? As you say, that it's going to help you navigate through the journey. And as you say, you've got to feel there's a connection there, haven't you?
Yeah. All the things that you don't expect to be chatting about your solicitor, you end up having a conversation about. So yeah, it is important.
Indeed.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So our next question is kind of a three-parter. So Laura, kind of prepare yourself.
Okay.
So this has come from somebody who is moving from England to Edinburgh, and they're kind of interested to know what the difference is maybe in kind of circumstances between the property market in England and then in Scotland. But I do actually think a lot of these are quite appropriate for anyone who's looking to buy or sell. So our first question from this person is, what are the important things to consider when choosing a solicitor, and what support can I reasonably expect from them?
Okay, so this is a great question, and honestly could talk for a long time about this. So I'll try and keep it brief, but give a good overview. So I think when you are trying to decide who to instruct, you have to take time to consider and speak to a solicitor who will listen to your objectives. What's your outcome? What are you looking to achieve, so that they can implement your strategy? Okay, obviously the two systems in down south and here are definitely different, so you need to have someone that can explain those to you. I think the level of support, obviously you need to consider what you feel that you would require, and again, you need to discuss this with your solicitor when you're instructing them. But it is really important that you have a good conversation at the outset, and it's not perhaps just over email, that you have an opportunity to chat to them, maybe on the phone or a video call.
Perfect. So our second question from this person is, how much above the asking price should I expect to offer? How do I decide what to offer? Can you explain this system to me a wee bit?
Okay, again, this is could be quite a lengthy answer, I suppose. And I think when you're deciding what you want to offer for a property, it's on a case-by-case basis. There's no set percentage, there's no exact science behind this. There's a lot of variables that come into play. The level of competition, how much you want to secure the property, what stage you're potentially at in your property search. The market is evolving on a day-by-day basis. There's new properties coming to market, there's new buyers looking as well. You'll have noticed obviously there's properties marketed that offer is over, and it might be an idea to speak to a solicitor to note interest in the property. They then have access to the ESPC archives and can look at past sales and check comparable properties for you as well. But there's also properties that are marketed at a fixed price, and if that is the case and you're keen to secure it, you should probably move quite quickly, because that tends to be someone in a good position on a first come first served basis that may secure the property. Okay, so there's different other advice in relation to the type of system and how it operates, and I'd happily take any further questions on that later on if they want to chat about it.
I think as well, Laura, isn't it? It's about how long you plan to stay in the property as well has a factor, doesn't it? Because if you're paying a premium but you think this is your forever home, you may go that little bit extra.
Absolutely.
But if you're going to move in 2 years' time, once you've taken into account all the costs of purchase, such as LBTT, if it applies, it's a factor, isn't it? So it's about the solicitor really understanding the entire picture.
Exactly. And I think it's sitting down and having a conversation about your objectives and where you want to see yourself being. And as I said, how long do you intend to be at that property for? and how quickly do you think you want to move as well? Because obviously it's quite difficult to try the two different systems at the same time. But yeah, absolutely, having a good conversation at the outlet, explaining what your situation is vital.
Perfect. So this question kind of moves on quite nicely from that conversation we've just been having. So Laura, this is kind of your final main question.
Okay.
So this person is saying, I'm in the area I'm looking for properties. They've been going significantly over home report value since the market reopened, about 15% plus. Should I bid this high or should I wait it out?
Okay. So again, great question. It's something that we're obviously asked on a daily basis. And I think Paul just touched on the fact that, it depends how long you see yourself being. What stage are you at in your property search? What stage are you at in your life? How much do you want the house? There's so many variables to really consider. Some people are in a position where they have to move. Maybe it's to relocate for work, or perhaps it's for schooling, or others are perhaps ready to sit and wait. They're in no rush. What I think has been quite important is that Paul had said earlier about interest rates as well. We've got lots of clients at the moment who are talking to their mortgage broker who are keen to take advantage of low rates and great mortgage products as well, to see if they can secure perhaps a good fixed rate going forward. And I think it comes down to, where do you see yourself being? Is it worth you spending that extra bit of money, and how long are you prepared to wait? Because no one knows what the market is going to do. How long are you willing to wait to see if markets, the prices do change? I'm a big believer of being proactive. So if you want to move somewhere, you want to do something, then try and make it happen. I mean, there's lots of advice out there, and obviously there's different schemes, as Paul's mentioned as well. So yeah, there's lots of people willing to help if you want to try and make that move.
Yeah.
Perfect. So Paul, you are up for our final pre-submitted question. And then what we will do, we're running a bit nearly over time, but if you guys are happy to kind of hang on with us, then we'll fire through our kind of Q&A box.
Sure.
So just to remind everyone, if you do have another extra wee question that you do want to ask, we will try our best to get to those in the Q&A box at the bottom. But Paul, our final pre-submitted question, what is an EPC rating and how do I approach this when deciding whether to buy a property or not?
Okay, I'll keep this fairly succinct then. So the EPC rating looks at the energy efficiency of your home. You'll see on the listings on the ESBC, it will have a rating, and that will be between A and G. And the report is completed at the time of the home report. It's the survey that goes out. It's one of the 3 bits of the home reports. It's valid for 10 years. And I think probably where it's relevant right now is if you're buying a property on a buy-to-let basis, the rating needs to be rating of an E for a change of tenancy from 2020, or all rentals from 2022. So what they're trying to do is encourage those properties that are an investment property to upgrade the efficiency of that home so they can permit a tenant to occupy it. There are things you can do to increase the efficiency of your home. They are in the energy report itself. You'll be able to have a look at those things, but for an example would be insulation, new combi boiler. Again, it depends on the type of property. Clearly some of the period properties, you can't simply just put double glazing in, but there are still things that you can do to improve the energy efficiency of your home. And I would say it's become a bigger driver than it was. We've seen more interest in that side, and rightly so, in the last couple of years. But hopefully that's a short answer.
Perfect. Grand. Well, we will just fire on with a couple of questions that have come into our Q&A box. So Laura and Paul, I hope you're ready. Well, the first one I can answer. So someone has asked, will you send a link to the recording afterwards? Yes, we can send a link to the recording. So it'll go up onto our YouTube channel, but we can definitely share that with you. So I was able to take that one for you guys.
And I saw the other one about maybe the way I rattled through the stats. So apologies if I tried my best to have a neutral accent there, but apologies if they didn't come across. But yeah, I think are we doing anything on a pictorial version?
So what we can do, we've got our articles that have all of this information already up on espc.com. So we can definitely send some links to that in the email after the event. So that should kind of have all of these kind of statistics that you were speaking through as well.
Yeah, I'm mindful we did rattle through quite a few stats very quickly in a slightly rural accent there. Sorry.
And also just to highlight as well, if there is anything that you're unclear about that we have covered today, please do get in touch. We are more than happy to help. So our other questions that have come in. So question 1 is, hi, my solicitor hasn't signed up for virtual viewings. Do you think this is necessary now in August?
I can take that one. I would say most definitely. I think a lot of people, even although you can now go out and physically view a property, there are lots of people who wish to virtually view before they make that decision. And lots of sellers also want to make sure that people have carried out maybe a virtual viewing so that they are definitely interested if they book a physical viewing later on. But yeah, it is really, really important. And I think as we go into the winter months, it may become more important as well. People don't want to go out when it's a bit darker or the weather's not great as it's been. So I think being able to sit in the comfort of your own home, nice and cozy, and take a virtual tour is crucial. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think we've seen the statistics on ESBC that would bear that out. The engagement with the virtual viewings has been very good. And
yep.
I think the click through then to go and view is been good. So yeah, I would say yes is the answer. I'd agree with Laura.
Perfect. And then our final pre-submitted question, our final question from RB Box is there an advantage of using a solicitor based in Edinburgh, or will any good Scottish solicitor do?
I think I'm slightly biased on that one.
Laura, I mean...
what I would say, I think, where are you looking to buy? Are you looking to buy in Edinburgh, or are you looking to buy in other parts of Scotland? Obviously, a Scottish solicitor can purchase any part of Scotland, but it's knowing the local market is really, really important, and having access to what's been happening. You know, even though we were submitting many offers for properties we might be missing out at closing date, we still know roughly what it went for, and we've got all that advice. I think it is important to instruct someone that's perhaps an expert in that area.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly the ESBC archive, so the historical sales data is a lot richer than what you'd see on the Registers of Scotland. So we give a lot more information to the solicitors. So that puts them in a far better position in terms of clarity of knowing exactly what type of property it is and what historically those properties have been sold for. Often that data is available a lot quicker as well than maybe some of the Registers of Scotland data. So, you know, I think that's a factor. I think they certainly would need to have access if they're offering in Edinburgh, because as Laura says, it's, you know, the market is fairly fast moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it is fast, you need to have someone who knows what's happening every day. You know, things are changing quite rapidly just now. So yeah, I would definitely advise that.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, guys. So that is us finished. Thank you very, very much for joining today. What I would highlight is, obviously, with everything in the market just now, it is an evolving situation. So we are trying to make sure that we are on top of it as possible, and we are publishing content regularly on our site. So please do keep an eye on that, and feel free to sign up to our newsletters as well, so you can kind of get the most up-to-date information of what is potentially happening. When you finish this event, there will be a little link there for a feedback survey. We would really appreciate if you could take 2 minutes to fill that in. It just means that we can make sure we are providing you guys with the most relevant information that you need. But thank you very, very much for joining, and we will hopefully see you virtually soon.
Thank you.
Thanks
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks very much, guys. Take care.
Thank you.